Welcome to Layer the Alchemist, where we discuss all things heavy metal and hard rock. On today's episode, another in my series of what I call In Defense Of. This is where I take an album or even an era of a band that can be polarizing and divisive amongst the fan base. Some people love it, some people don't. So today I'm coming to the defense of the Joe Lynn Turner Era of Rainbow. I am a huge Rainbow fan. You've heard me talk many times about how Ritchie Blackmore is my favorite guitar player. He was number one in my favorite guitar players video. And when people ask me, I always say I love all eras of Rainbow equally. Now, if you were to push me on the issue, I would probably pick the Dio era because Ronnie James Dio is one of my favorite heavy metal singers of all time. Long Live Rock and Roll is one of my favorite records of all time, but also Bent Out of Shape is one of my favorite albums of all time too. So I love both eras equally. And maybe a slight edge to the Dio era, but I do really love the Joe Lynn Turner era. And I think, especially amongst metalheads, you'll hear people that are quick to write off the Joe Lynn Turner era. That they just they went poppy, they wanted to be Foreigner. The only era of Rainbow is real is the Dio era. Everything after that is I don't like it. It's garbage. And I sort of get it. I get where people are coming from. I mean, there's no denying that starting with when Graham Bonnet joined the band with Down to Earth, he was between Dio and Joe Lynn Turner, that Ritchie decided to move the band in a more commercial direction, more, if you want to say, I don't want to say poppy, but maybe a more melodic rock direction. But the thing is that if you look at the Down to Earth album, and I'm not going to get too into that because I think I'm going to make an In Defense Of video for that album because there's a lot of people that either love or hate that album. That album came out in 1979, and for me, that really foreshadowed where heavy metal and hard rock was going to go starting in 1980. I talked about this with Scorpion's Love Drive. The same thing, like the songs got shorter, more focused on melody, better production, and to me that's Down to Earth is the same way. So Ritchie and Rainbow were sort of forecasting where metal was going to go. They were moving away from the extended guitar solos and keyboard solos and all that kind of stuff. As much as I love that stuff, they were moving in a different direction that a lot of bands did come 1980. So the Joe Lynn Turner era, I think, I understand that for some people it sounds really slick and everything, but for me it's just that's what Ritchie was feeling. I think this has always been a part of Ritchie Blackmore, the melodicism, and you hear it in his guitar playing. So to me, this is where he wanted to go with the band. And the other thing that I think is difficult for people is that Joe Lynn Turner is a very different singer than Ronnie James Dio. Ronnie has a very epic voice. He has a lot of grit and power to his voice. Whereas Joe Lynn Turner has more of a smooth, he has a huge range, but his vocal delivery is a little bit more laid back, a little bit more, has a smoother tone to his voice. And also, Ronnie's lyrics revolved a lot around fantasy type lyrics, and Joe Lynn Turner's are more, I don't know, earthy. I don't know how you would describe his lyrics. And don't get me wrong, I'm a sucker for fantasy, swords and sorcery lyrics. I love that kind of stuff, but I also appreciate what Joe Lynn Turner did when he came into the band. So, and then another point, so that's, usually the issues that people have. But I want to point out that there's a lot of great playing on these records. In my opinion, Ritchie sounds great on these records. He's just picking his spots a little bit more. Yeah, there's not a ton of like over the top guitar playing like you might have heard like on the Rising album, Light in the Black, with the keyboard solos and the guitar solos. Here it's a little bit more focused, but he still has a lot of great moments like in the instrumentals. I'm going to talk about some of them. Yeah, this era maybe lacks the really big, huge, monumental songs like Stargazer and Gates of Babylon. I mean, those are some of the greatest metal songs ever written. So this era maybe doesn't really have that to its name, but there's still some really, really great songs here. And I also note that, in the Dio era, there were some songs that not everything was Stargazer during the Dio era. You had Black Sheep of the Family off the first record. You had If You Don't Like Rock and Roll. Those were all like straight up boogie rock, type songs. Off of Rising, you had Do You Close Your Eyes, which is an upbeat melodic rocker. You had off of Long Live Rock and Roll, LA Connection, which had kind of a funky groove to it. It reminds me a lot of Tight Squeeze from the Joe Lynn Turner era. So, all right. Now, in the Joe Lynn Turner era, you do have some heavy songs here that I think people they forget about. So let's take the first album that when Joe Lynn Turner came into the band, Difficult to Cure. Not my favorite Rainbow record, maybe my least favorite Rainbow record, but there's still some really great stuff on here, like Spotlight Kid. That's a fast, upbeat one. I love the lyrics in that one. This is an example of Joe Lynn Turner taking the lyrics in a different direction about somebody who loves the spotlight. He can't get enough of it. It's got great lead playing from Ritchie, a little bit of a neoclassical, influence like in the solo and in the playing. Great riffing, great singing from Joe Lynn Turner. Can't Happen Here on here is a great one. It's got sort of, to me, a slightly similar feel to the song Long Live Rock and Roll. A real like kind of fist in the air type of chorus. There's also some great instrumentals on this one. You've got Maybe Next Time, and you've got the title track, Difficult to Cure, where he's quoting pieces from Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. So lots of great guitar playing on this album. There are some clunkers on here, like I really don't like Magic. That might be my least favorite Rainbow song. And, I can understand I Surrender is pretty poppy, but I like it. I think it's really catchy. I think Ritchie has a great lead solo in that one. So Midtown Tunnel Vision is really cool. And so, there's a lot of cool stuff on this one. All right, next, Straight Between the Eyes. This was the first Rainbow album that I actually heard, I think. I think I might have heard some of the Dio stuff, but this was, my first Joe Lynn Turner era album that I got. And there's some great stuff on here, like Death Alley Driver. I mean, that's a real heavy one. That's sort of the highway star of the Joe Lynn Turner era, really upbeat and driving. Ritchie's guitar solo is very neoclassical, licks and runs in it. Fantastic. I love that song. Tearing Out My Heart is pretty heavy and, has a little bit of a dark vibe to it. And the last song on this record, man, Eyes of Fire, that could have been one that was from the Dio era. And there's a lot of other great stuff on here. Stone Cold. I mean, Stone Cold is a great, it's a great melodic rock song. And it's kind of moody. It's got some feeling to it. It's got a really great emotional guitar solo from Ritchie. It's got a great vocal melody and delivery from Joe Lynn Turner. So, there's a lot of great stuff on here. Bring On the Night. I mentioned Tight Squeeze already. Tearing Out My Heart is a great one. Power is fun. Mistreated. Rock Fever. That's an upbeat, driving one. So lots of like up-tempo, rocking stuff on here. All right, then, off of the Straight Between the Eyes album. Then the last Joe Lynn Turner album is Bent Out of Shape. This is one of my favorite albums of all time. Man, like every song on here for me is great. I love the production on this. It's so melodic. It's got a great flow to it. It's just it sounds like there's not a note out of place on this record. Everything is really well thought out. It's just a really well structured record. It starts with Stranded, which is a pretty heavy number. Fire Dance is also a heavy one. You've got Snowman, which is a great instrumental, and Anybody There, man, just Richie, I love when he just gets melodic, and Anybody There and Snowman is the same way. It sort of has kind of a moody, atmospheric vibe to it. I mean, just, Richie sort of moved into a different area with his guitar playing, and he says this, where it felt like he didn't need to play fast all the time, where it was just more about playing the right notes at the right time, picking his spots, and he does that really well on here. Can't Let You Go is a great melodic rocker. Desperate Heart is really cool. Street of Dreams, I mean, that's another great example. That's sort of like the Stone Cold of this album. A great, again, it is, I don't want to say a dark vibe to it, but it is a little bit more, a kind of a moody feel to it, and it's got a great chorus, great guitar solo from Richie. Yes, he's not shredding or anything, but it's so melodic and just so fits perfectly to the song. And I think Joe Lynn Turner really brought that out of Richie. Joe Lynn Turner's melodies were so strong that Richie felt like he had to match that with his guitar playing. And you'll hear him say that in interviews, like with Stone Cold and Street of Dreams. He heard what Joe Lynn did, and he felt like he had to do, so he just couldn't go in there and just rip away. He had to really contribute something that was really going to add to the song. So it really pushed Richie in a more melodic direction, which I think was really good, and I think that it worked. And the other thing is that, with like the lyrics, if you were to change some of these song titles, let's change the album covers, and let's say Street of Dreams was, Evil in My Dreams, or Spotlight Kid was The Night's Sun or something. If it had like medieval fantasy type lyrics, maybe it would have made people feel a little bit different. And to me, you could insert those over here and it would still work, because some of the riffing underneath these things is still, it's just that, he's not singing them sword and sorcery lyrics. He's just singing different types of lyrics. There's still heavy riffing here. There's still some moody and minor key sounding stuff on these albums. Like Bent Out of Shape is a perfect example of that for me. There's a lot of mood shifts and changes here on that album and on a lot of these records. So, all right, so there you go. Me coming to the defense of the Joe Lynn Turner era of Rainbow. I just think that it was different, but I think it was just as strong in its own different way. So like I said, all the eras of Rainbow are sort of, they're like my children. They're different, but I love them equally. So all right, there you go. Let me know in the comments down below what you think of the Joe Lynn Turner era. Do you like it? If you haven't listened to any of that stuff in a while, or maybe ever really given it a shot, man, get out Straight Between the Eyes, or get out Bent Out of Shape. Give these albums a listen, man. Turn them up. They're produced fantastic. I think you may, go into it with an open mind, and I think you may find some really cool things in there. So, all right, let me know in the comments down below what you think of the Joe Lynn Turner era. Make sure you hit like and subscribe. And until we see you again, make sure you stay heavy, stay metal.